Welcome, dear listeners, to the Softly Spoken Science Podcast. I'm your host, the Softly Spoken Science Nerd, bringing you bedtime stories calculated to raise your knowledge level. This podcast is dedicated to the belief that a good, calm science talk will put you right to sleep. If you feel like this might be the case, hit like and subscribe now, and tap the little bell to be notified about the next video. Tonight we are returning to one of my all-time favorite dinosaur books growing up, the Dinosaur Society's Dinosaur Encyclopedia by Don Lessem and Donald Glut. It was one of the most scientifically serious mass-market dinosaur books of the 1990s, the era of the first two Jurassic Park films, just after we knew dinosaurs were warm-blooded, just before we knew they had feathers. It is organized alphabetically. Last time we reviewed from Bactrosaurus through Ceratosaurus. Tonight we will review from Cetiosauriscus through Deinocheirus. Cetiosauriscus stewarti. This primitive, large, four-legged browser had a whip-like tail. It was originally thought to be a Cetiosaurus, a larger sauropod with a shorter tail. Instead, Cetiosauriscus shares a number of diagnostic characteristics with the diplodocid sauropods, those with whiplash tails. Cetiosaurus medius, the first four-legged plant eater of the sauropod suborder to be named and described, Cetiosaurus is also one of the geologically oldest known sauropods. This dinosaur typifies the Cetiosaurid family of primitive sauropods. Cetiosaurus was a large dinosaur with forelimbs that were moderately long compared to the hind limb bones. The genus Cetiosaurus was founded on various bones which Sir Richard Owen, the man who invented the term dinosaur, at first believed represented a huge crocodile. Because its back vertebrae were coarse-textured, like that of a whale, Owen believed Cetiosaurus was an aquatic animal. It was, as we know now, a land animal. Yet, Cetiosaurus remains have been found in deposits showing evidence of coastal waters, small lakes, and lagoons, so the dinosaur may have lived, or at least died, beside watery areas. Creationists, who believe there was a worldwide flood a few thousand years ago, believe two of each kind, or family, of dinosaur survived for a year on the same wooden boat together. They imagine that what geologists have interpreted for 3 centuries as a fossil succession is in fact an optical illusion, as well as a conspiracy to defraud the public. They think the evolutionary successions of dinosaurs from Jurassic rocks to Cretaceous rocks are because Jurassic dinosaurs lived in different environments than Cretaceous dinosaurs, and were overwhelmed sooner in Noah's flood. In other words, the only way they can even attempt to deny evolution is by affirming an unrealistic version of it. Impossible contradictions immediately rise from this view. One big problem with the idea of a recent worldwide flood is that the fossils themselves are completely wrong. Most are fragmentary and indicate a history of scavenging before burial. If there was a sudden worldwide deluge, most bodies would be buried rapidly. These would typically be intact, and bodies that were buried slowly would be torn apart by marine scavengers rather than terrestrial scavengers. Relatively few fossils actually show evidence of a sudden deluge, and when they do, the deluge in evidence is always local. If there really was a worldwide flood, the fossil record would have a lot more mass graves. These graves' contents would be mixed from wide areas and diverse ecosystems. Discrete extinction events, such as the Permian Triassic and the Cretaceous Paleogene, would not be identifiable whatsoever. What's more, creationists suppose that sauropods, being slow afoot, would have been unable to flee the floodwaters to higher ground. This is supposed to explain why sauropods and other dinosaurs only occur in some rocks but not others. But actually, sauropods were very buoyant. Their lungs were built out into a complex network of air sacs built throughout most of their bodies, making them less dense than water, almost like giant balloon animals. Due to these balloon animals' great size, horizontal floating orientation, and extreme compartmentalization of their respiratory systems, air would escape them only gradually after they had died. So if Noah's flood really happened, all sauropods not on Noah's Ark would have been floating on the surface like corks, occasionally bumping into the ship, floating debris and each other until eventually they died of the trauma and slowly were eaten by sharks. Their dismembered remains, studded with shark teeth, would have sunk to the seafloor wherever they randomly fell. Obviously, however, that's not the evidence we have. If creationism was true, sauropods would have no fossil succession whatsoever, because their bodies would have been randomly distributed around the world by flotsam physics. None of them would have been buried in their home environments. They would not give evidence of scavenging by terrestrial carnivores because their bodies would have been intact, floating on the sea surface until the sharks could get to them all. We would find bits of sauropod randomly distributed all over the world on both land and sea floor. In old lakes, they would be more common than mammoth bones. We would find them concentrated in only the topmost layers of flood sediments, above all other flightless dinosaurs and mammals. In fact, in the parallel universe of young Earth creationism, a distinct layer of sauropod bones pocked with shark teeth would mark the uppermost deposits of Noah's flood all around the world, both on land and under the sea. Like in our universe, the iridium layer marks the impact at Chicxulub. Changdusaurus laminaplacodus. There is little to say about this animal other than that it is an intermediate-sized plate-backed dinosaur, a stegosaur. Its name has been published, but it has not yet been described. Chaoyoungosaurus liaosiensis. Almost nothing is known of this possible pachycephalosaur. It seems to be a small dinosaur with weak canine-like teeth. Chasmosaurus belli. Chasmosaurus is one of the geologically oldest known large horned dinosaurs. It is also one of the best known, since many specimens have been collected since its discovery in 1901. Chasmosaurus was a modest-sized horned dinosaur. Its skull measured about 1.5 meters in length, much of it consisting of crest. This crest or frill was flat and strikingly long, making up more than half the back of the head. The openings of the crest were especially large. The back edge of the crest was thin, resulting in a neck shield that was probably not effective as a defense. More likely, this crest was used for the attachment of jaw muscles, or as a threatening display. Chasmosaurus had a long skull. Its brow horns ranged from small and short to large, solid, backwardly curving structures. The nose horn was always short and stocky. This dinosaur had a smaller adult body than other large horned dinosaurs, and very slender limb bones. Its chest was narrow and straight-sided, its abdomen wide and barrel-shaped. Fossil skin impressions show small, closely set, 5- or 6-sided bumps that increased in size to larger, rounded knobs. Of all ceratopsids, Chasmosaurus is the most geologically widespread and species-rich. Chialingosaurus kuani. Chialingosaurus was a medium-sized, slender, plate-backed dinosaur, or stegosaur. Its skull was narrower than those of other plate-backed dinosaurs, such as Stegosaurus and Chungkingosaurus. The back plates in Chialingosaurus seem to be less specialized than in later stegosaurs such as Chondrosteosaurus and Stegosaurus. They include rather small, plate-like spines and small plates arranged in pairs running in 2 rows from the neck to the tail. Chilantaisaurus tashuikouensis. There is considerable puzzlement about this large carnivorous dinosaur. Chilantaisaurus had a long, massive upper arm. The claws of the hand were unusually large, and the first finger had a backward curving claw. The upper leg bone was longer than the lower leg bone. Its toes were short, and the toe bones were not fused together. These features suggest that this dinosaur was not as fast a runner as many other theropods. Chilantaisaurus shared some characteristics with both Allosaurus, the large North American Jurassic predator, and the tyrannosaurs in Asia and North America of the late Cretaceous. Chilantaisaurus was most likely an allosaur. Chingkankousaurus fragilis. This genus was founded on a long, slender piece of bone that seems to be a right shoulder blade. If this is in fact a scapula, it identifies Chingkankousaurus as a tyrannosaur. Chirostenotes pergracilis. This lightly built, bird-like theropod was named on the basis of its distinctive narrow hands. The third finger of the hand was longer than the first, and very slender. The toe bones were also long and slender. What were the functions of these narrow extremities? The hands were suitable for collecting mollusks, other invertebrates, and eggs. The long, slender third finger was somewhat like the fingers in kangaroos and many birds, and was perhaps capable of a wide range of movement. This specialized finger may have been used in prying insects and other invertebrates from crevices in trees or streams, or even used in grooming. The long hind limbs and large feet could have been wading adaptations. Chirostenotes was originally based on a type specimen consisting of bones of the hand. Another dinosaur, Macrophalangia, was founded upon material that included a complete foot. Both dinosaurs were discovered in the same formation, and for a long time scientists suspected that they might be the same animal. When a partial skeleton was found in Alberta in 1979, overlapping parts showed that Chirostenotes and Macrophalangia were indeed one and the same. Two kinds of Chirostenotes have been recognized. One, with a more delicate foot, seems to be male. The other, with a more robust upper part of the foot, female. Chondrosteosaurus gigas. This poorly known genus may be a Camerosaurid, one of the boxy-headed sauropods. Not enough fossil material has been found to determine if it is indeed one of those enormous plant eaters. The type specimen consists only of 2 vertebrae collected on the Isle of Wight. When this fossil find was first described, Sir Richard Owen believed it came from an animal best suited to watery environments, a notion that has been incorrectly applied to sauropods in general for a century. From that idea, Owen believed that the animal, when on land, must have been supported by limbs of dinosaurian proportions. Chubutisaurus insignis. This large, heavily built and little-known 4-legged herbivore had a humpback or fin-back look. Chungkingosaurus jiangbeiensis. This rather small, plate-backed dinosaur, a stegosaur, had a high, narrow skull. Its plates were thick and seemed to be intermediate in shape between stegosaurus plates and pointed spikes. This condition could support the theory that, in stegosaurian evolution, spikes evolved into plates. As in the North American genus Stegosaurus, Chungkingosaurus had 4 spikes, arranged in pairs. No actual plates of Chungkingosaurus have yet been found. Ceonodon arctatus. Ceonodon was founded on teeth that Edward Drinker Cope, the great 19th century dinosaur namer, believed were suited for pulverizing vegetation. The pencil-like fossil teeth are too poor to classify with any certainty. They may represent a hadrosaurid. Ceonodon, named at a time when duck-billed dinosaurs were not well understood, could be synonymous with another duckbill of its time. This name, therefore, should not be used. Chaoyoungosaurus is the most primitive known North American hadrosaur. Its first foot bone was tiny. This bone is entirely absent in the more advanced duck-billed dinosaurs and present in the more primitive iguanodontids. Chaoyoungosaurus may have descended from iguanodontids and may be ancestral to later North American hadrosaurs. Though smaller, its body proportions superficially resembled those of later duckbills, such as the well-known Edmontosaurus. Without a skull, however, the precise status of Chaoyoungosaurus cannot be known. Chasmosaurus spatula. This large 4-legged browser, or sauropod, is known only from teeth which measure about 5 to 6 centimeters long. Originally, German paleontologist Friedrich von Hoyne believed that these teeth belonged to the crocodile Teleosaurus. They were thought to be related to the meat-eating dinosaur Geniodectes, but they are now believed to be those of a sauropod. Coelophysis boweri. This early theropod had a small head, strong jaws, sharp teeth, a long slender neck, a slim body, and somewhat long front limbs. It belonged to the primitive Ceratosaur group of carnivorous dinosaurs, some of which had horns. Hundreds of well-preserved Coelophysis skeletons were found by paleontologist Edwin H. Colbert's field party in a dinosaur graveyard at Ghost Ranch, New Mexico in 1947. The specimen by which Coelophysis was named was one that some paleontologists found difficult to distinguish as a distinct genus. A new name has been given to the Ghost Ranch fossils. As of this writing, other paleontologists are attempting to get the name Coelophysis reinstated by the committee that determines scientific names. Ghost Ranch, New Mexico is a dinosaur mass grave with hundreds of Coelophysis dinosaurs. This is a perfect example of the kind of fossil deposit that would be much more common if there really was a worldwide flood. Only Ghost Ranch is full of Coelophysis and not a lot else. If there was really a worldwide flood, all the bodies in all the mass graves would be much more diverse. Coelosaurus, doubtful, see Ornithomimus. Coeloroides largus, doubtful. Known only from an incomplete tail, Coeloroides seems to have been one of the very large carnivorous dinosaurs, about the size of Allosaurus. The vertebrae of the tail are quite large, measuring from 9 to 11 centimeters long. Coelurus fragilis, doubtful. This poorly known carnivorous dinosaur was very small, with hollow vertebrae. All the known bones of this dinosaur are extremely lightweight, suggesting a fast and agile animal. Coelurus is sometimes incorrectly regarded as the same dinosaur as Ornitholestes. They may have superficially resembled each other in life, but their bones are quite different. Coloratosaurus brevis. Coloratosaurus, while not well known, is related to the well-documented prosauropods Platyosaurus and Lufengosaurus. These were primitive, early plant eaters with small heads and large bodies. Coloratosaurus had a shorter snout than those dinosaurs. Its eyes were apparently relatively large. Compsognathus longipes. Compsognathus is one of the smallest of all known dinosaurs. An original estimate of its adult size, 70 centimeters, was based on a juvenile skeleton no bigger than a small partridge. Compsognathus was built like most small carnivorous dinosaurs. Its skull was low and measured about 6.5 centimeters long. Its neck was relatively long, its forelimb was extremely short, and seems to have had 2 fingers with powerful claws. The 2-fingered hand, like the hands of the much larger tyrannosaurids of the late Cretaceous, makes Compsognathus unique among late Jurassic theropods. The animal's upper leg bone was massively constructed for its size, and measured about 7.6 centimeters in length. The lower leg bone became slender toward the foot. The foot had a bird-like construction with 3 functional claws. With this light and powerful anatomy, Compsognathus must have been a fast-running predator. Because of its small size, it probably ate insects, but may have also preyed upon small vertebrates. The latter idea is reinforced by its sharp teeth and by the discovery of a tiny lizard skeleton in the stomach area of the namesake dinosaur. At the time when Compsognathus lived, the ancestors of birds and other dinosaurs were much closer together, and their relatives had great diversity even then. Compsognathus appears so similar to Archaeopteryx that the most notable difference is the apparent absence of feathers. Compsognathus' closest relatives, however, did have furry or downy integuments. Skin textures and coverings varied among dinosaurs, and many theropods did have feathers like those characteristic of birds today. It is thought that larger dinosaurs generally needed to shed excess heat rather than retain it, and therefore had less coverage. They likely had more feathers as juveniles than they did as adults. However, some adult multi-ton theropods were feathered head to toe, while their close cousins were relatively bare-skinned, and even the tiny Compsognathus seems to have been bare compared to its relative Archaeopteryx. Compsognathus solus. Doubtful. This poorly known meat-eating dinosaur might be an allosauride. Compsognathus is known only from a part of the neck. The first vertebra closely resembles the same bone in Allosaurus. Conchoraptor gracilis. Conchoraptor was a relatively small member of the Oviraptorid family of toothless carnivores. It was originally believed to be a juvenile of the egg thief genus Oviraptor. It is known only from a small skull measuring about 10 centimeters long. In life, it may have possessed a horny beak, which it could have used to crush mollusks or eggs. Unlike Oviraptor, Conchoraptor lacked a crest. Crests usually appear as animals grow into maturity. Corythosaurus casuarius. The duckbill Corythosaurus is easily distinguished by the feature for which it was named, the helmet-like crest atop its head, resembling the helmet of a Corinthian soldier. The head of Corythosaurus is high, narrow, and compressed from side to side. The highest part of the crest is directly above the eyes. The function of Corythosaurus' crest has long been a subject of speculation. At one time it was thought that this crest, hollow and connected to the nasal passages, somehow allowed this dinosaur to breathe while underwater. Today it is believed that the crest in Corythosaurus and other hadrosaurs served other functions, perhaps increasing the animal's sense of smell or its capacity for sound production. Also, the crest could have served as a visual display for identification purposes. The size and shape of the crest probably varied by age or sex. Another feature characteristic of Corythosaurus' skull was a muzzle that was short, narrow, and slightly expanded toward the front. The front of the mouth was covered by a horny beak. Inside the mouth, as in other duckbills, was an enormous battery of more than 600 teeth. There were up to 43 rows of teeth in the upper jaw. The lower jaw was deep and massive, and had 37 tooth rows. Fossilized skin impressions showed that Corythosaurus had elaborate skin patterns. There were numerous armor plates on Corythosaurus' skin. The largest was about 38 millimeters long, 32 millimeters wide, and 8 millimeters high. These armor plates ranged in shape from circular to elliptical to pyramidal. Some suggest that Corythosaurus' body had other decorative features. As on most or possibly all duck-billed dinosaurs, A fleshy frill may have run down its back and tail, and perhaps along its head and neck as well. Corythosaurus was a sizable animal, weighing perhaps 2 tons or more. It ran on 2 legs and balanced itself with its horizontally held tail. A number of species have been referred to Corythosaurus over the years. All of them are now known to belong to the type species. The differences originally perceived between these species are due to age, sex, or individual variation. Craspedodon lanciensis. This poorly known herbivore may have resembled the well-known and much earlier plant-eater Iguanodon. Craspedodon is known from 2 incomplete teeth that are more advanced in the development of their ridges than the teeth in Iguanodon. Craspedodon may be a descendant of Iguanodon. Cratiomus lepidophorus. Poorly known and of doubtful validity, Cratiomus was a small armored dinosaur similar to Cetiosaurus and possibly the same animal. Craterosaurus patanensis. Poorly known and possibly a plate-backed dinosaur, Craterosaurus was founded on a single incomplete vertebra which was first misidentified as a brain case. This bone differs from vertebrae and all other known stegosaurs by having a deep pitting on the top surface. Deinocheirus armatus. Famous as the first stegosaur to be described and named, Deinocheirus had the same general proportions as the much larger Stegosaurus. It differed mainly in the form and arrangement of its plates and spines, and in having slightly longer front legs. Deinocheirus bore 2 rows of small plates, and 2 rows of paired spines. Just where the plates ended and the spines began is not known. The plates were asymmetrical, and had a slanted base that measures 150 millimeters across. The only preserved plate seems to have been on the left side of the body. The tail spines were long, with sharp edges. A preserved left tail spine is 45 centimeters long. An egg believed to belong to Deinocheirus lanieri was found in Alfezero, Portugal. Other species of Deinocheirus have been named, all of which were originally referred to the genus Homosaurus. Changdusaurus unionensis. Hardly anything is known about this big herbivore, which has not yet been formally described. It may be a primitive plant-eater that moved on 2 or 4 legs, a prosauropod, or a large 4-legged grazer, a sauropod. Changdusaurus is known from an incomplete skeleton that includes vertebrae, ribs, and limb bones. Deinocheirus magnus. This huge 4-legged plant-eater has not yet been formally described. It was a primitive sauropod. Dinocheirus indicus. Little is known of this dinosaur. It was announced as a new Carnosaurian dinosaur and described as a large carnivore with similarities to Sinosauros triassicus, a primitive meat-eater less than 3 meters long. Cetiosaurus turosus. This enormous carnivorous dinosaur, known only from adult specimens, is similar to such well-known tyrannosaurs as Albertosaurus and the later Tyrannosaurus. It may even have been a direct ancestor of Tyrannosaurus rex. Cetiosaurus had a large head. The triangular bones above its eyes were large, but less prominent than in Tyrannosaurus rex. Cetiosaurus had smaller horns above and behind the eyes as well. Cetiosaurus differed from its contemporary, the well-known Albertosaurus, in having shorter and higher vertebrae, which would have made its neck and trunk stockier and deeper. Also, its tail was probably thicker. Cetiosaurus' forelimbs were longer than Albertosaurus's, and the upper part of its foot was slightly shorter. Like other tyrannosaurids, Cetiosaurus had a 2-fingered hand. How could 2 very large meat-eating dinosaurs have prospered in the same environment? Fewer Cetiosaurs and horned dinosaurs are known from about 75 million years ago in western Canada than are Albertosaurs and duck-billed dinosaurs. The lighter, more fleet-footed Albertosaurus was well adapted for hunting duck-billed dinosaurs. This may mean that the heavier, more powerful Cetiosaurus hunted the horned dinosaurs. Cetiosaurus lived in marshlands adjacent to streams, an environment also inhabited by horned dinosaurs like Centrosaurus, and duckbills and dome-headed dinosaurs. Cetiosaurus represents 2 frightening questions for paleontologists and filmmakers. How fast could a small tyrannosaur run, and how big could it get before it completely lost that ability? Generally, it is believed that fully grown Tyrannosaurus rexes were limited to a fast walk, but certainly small tyrannosaurs were fast runners, and the juveniles of large species were probably just as fast as their smaller cousins. Cetiosaurus grew up to 3 or 4 tons in weight. It was slightly bulkier than its cousin Albertosaurus, which was about as tall, but 20% more lightly built. As adults, their bodies were specialized for hunting different sets of prey items. As juveniles, they would have been more similar. It seems juvenile tyrannosaurs sometimes hunted ornithomimosaurs, which were comparable in speed to an ostrich. As tyrannosaurs went through their adolescent growth spurts, such pursuits would have grown harder, riskier, and less rewarding, until finally they became impossible. Tyrannosaurus rexes, at a certain point, could no longer run, but adult Albertosauruses probably could. Well, could Daspletosaurus? These are the questions that keep me up at night. Dinosaurus bashanensis. This primitive sauropod was huge and solidly built. Its head was also large and heavy, with nostril openings in the front. Its lower jaws were heavily constructed and its teeth were large and spoon-shaped. Sauropod skulls are fragile and very rare, except in the remarkable Zigong quarry which produced Dinosaurus. Since that skull and the skeleton of Dinosaurus were not found together, they may not belong to the same kind of dinosaur. However, if both elements belong to the same animal, Dinosaurus could be regarded as a possible ancestor of diplodocids, the whip-tailed sauropods. The skull also shows features of the Cetiosaurids, a stouter group of sauropods. The blocky skull is representative of the entire animal's anatomy. Its limbs were robust, and all 4 feet had 5 toes. Teeth of a primitive sauropod similar to the teeth of Dinosaurus were found in the Chengdu Basin in Tibet. Deinocheirus mirificus. This bizarre theropod is known mostly from a pair of huge forelimbs. These limbs were spectacularly long and slender, measuring about 240 centimeters long. The length of the lower part of the arm was slightly more than the length of the upper arm. The hand was slightly longer than the upper arm, and the upper part of the hand was comparatively long as well. The hand had 3 fingers of equal length, each bearing claws. In life, the claws were covered by a horny sheath. Some paleontologists have suggested that these are the claws of a gigantic ornithomimid dinosaur. However, Deinocheirus' hand was broader than that of the ornithomimid Ornithomimus, and unlike Ornithomimus, Deinocheirus' first finger could not fold inward for effective grasping. Because the claws also resemble those in both extinct and living sloths, it has been suggested that this dinosaur, like sloths, had a trunk no longer than its forelimbs, and that it could climb some trees. Without the remains of the rest of the animal, it is impossible to know just what Deinocheirus looked like. Clearly the animal was quite large. For now, this dinosaur remains a mystery, both in its classification and its appearance. Deinocheirus somewhat resembles a strange family of theropods with large forelimbs and claws, the therizinosaurs, some of which it lived alongside. However, actually Deinocheirus is an ornithomimosaur. Its smaller relatives were the ostriches of the dinosaur world. In lifestyle, Deinocheirus was more like an African buffalo, or, indeed, a therizinosaurus. It needed to be, because both Deinocheirus and therizinosaurus were hunted by Tarbosaurus, one of the most dangerous predators ever to walk the earth. For now, we reviewed from Cetiosauriscus through Deinocheirus. Next time, we will review from Dinodon through Gasosaurus. I hope you enjoyed the Softly Spoken Science podcast. Good night.